What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. So today I will be talking about some of my favorite March thrillers, which are not any of the books that are currently on the March TBR. And I just thought about doing this because I did a Valentine's Day, well, not a Valentine's Day, but a Valentine's month, like favorite romance books of all time. And so I thought I would do some of my favorite thrillers that I've read recently. Some of these books I read a while ago. Some of them are very recent. I also just want to do a plug here and say, in my head, Harry Potter is like, I don't know what, because it is fantasy, but then they're also solving mysteries in half of the books. And then also on top of that, you have like long-standing feud that's happening with Voldemort. And there's all that situation going on. And then it's also academic, but it's also outside of academia in the 7th book. So I don't know where that falls, but Sorcerer's Stone. Love that book. Anyways, neither here nor there. Just wanted to put that out there because for a hot minute I was sitting there and I was like, well, they're trying to figure out what the Sorcerer's Stone is and how to get to it. So does that count as a thriller mystery? I don't know. So yeah, that did cross my mind just a little bit, because I'm crazy pants like that. For those that are new here, welcome. My name is Jaya. I love all things books and I love posting videos about books on this channel because I'm a little obsessed with reading. And if that's your type of vibe, you're definitely in the right place, and you should totally consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell so you can come hang out with me every Wednesday and Sunday when I put out videos. For those of you that are returning, thank you so much for being here. It's always so much fun to have you guys here with me. I love reading all the comments. I love seeing that you guys are enjoying the material coming out because honestly, I just want to create a community for readers where we're all equally obsessed with the books, and that's the vibes. I also realize this is not a complete list of all of my favorite thrillers because I still have a lot of books in my parents' house, which is technically in a different state. So I don't have access to those books. Also, many of books I read like during the time of school and things like that, like high school and undergrad, and I don't have access to those books either. So this is very, very recent in terms of my favorite thrillers. It's probably within the span of the past 4 to 5 years, and it's whatever I have here in my current location with me. So I just wanted to say that as a preface. But even then, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 books to go through. So I was like, should be fun. So without further ado, let's jump into this video in no specific order. So the first book I have here, although it is really funny that many of these are book of the month books, and I just feel like they pick good books, and I will be doing a book of the month for the month of March soon when that box arrives, but I will just say like this subscription service is absolutely great, and I will talk way more in depth about it in the book of the month video that I like to do at least once a month. But the Lucy Foley book, The Guest List, I thought was really, really fun. This book is basically following a woman who is having her wedding take place and a murder happens. That was strange. A murder happens at the site of her wedding, and they're trying to figure out why this guest is dead, how it happened, etc., etc. It's very entertaining. It's taking place in the middle of a remote island, and no one really knows what's going on. The main characters' perspectives that you're reading from is the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaid. And in general, it's a very fast-paced book. It's very fun. All the different characters are very eclectic, and it's just really enjoyable to see the ways that they think and the way that they behave. And I love a good whodunit. So it was really fun to read. And just to give you an idea, this book was released back in 2020. At that time, it was a Book of the Year finalist for Book of the Month. So this was a minute ago that I read this book, but I really did enjoy it, and I strongly recommend it if you're looking for something fun, fast-paced, and enjoyable thriller and a whodunit kind of mystery. I will also say all of the narrating characters are really hard to love and like. They all have like their little quirks and qualms which make them questionable characters, but the overall narrative of the story is really fun. The next book that I would recommend, this is a more recent read. I actually read this book last year and I read it for a book club. It's called First Lie Wins. I adore this book. This book is basically following the story of a woman who gives up her identity and basically, based on who her boss wants her to infiltrate, she will take on a new personality and a new name and embed herself in the lives of her marks or her targets. And in this particular book, her mark is a man who seems like he has everything together, and he's, you know, very sweet, very cultured, very friend and family oriented, but he secretly has a business going on the side that one would call questionable. Now, in the middle of all of this, someone shows up at their doorstep pretending to be her, the real her. And now there's a question of whether or not she's compromised and whether or not her company or her organization is after her. It's a very, very interesting book. It was really fun to see all the different characters in this book and the way that she can so easily slip in and out of personalities. It was also really fun to see like her as a character as a whole, why she is the way she is. You get a little bit of her background in this, and you also get to see her relationship with her Mark, who she is now engaged to marry. So yeah, I loved reading about Evie and Ryan. This was an absolutely amazing book, and I think everyone should read it. Here's just all the tabs that I had for this book. It was just so much fun to read. I enjoyed annotating it as well, and love the discussion for this book. This was a solid 5-star read for me. The next book I'm sharing is actually a lighter book. This book is more humorous than anything else, but it is also like cozy mystery vibes, and that is Arsenic and Adobo. So basically this woman, she owns a restaurant. She runs it with her family. She's kind of down on her luck. Her ex, who also happens to be a food critic, who's also like a complete and total jerk, shows up at the restaurant, ends up eating her food, and dies. And now everyone is under the belief that she's the one who killed her husband. And this book is basically her and her family trying to clear her name. It's very, very entertaining. It's so much fun. And I do think if you're looking for a nice, cozy mystery thriller, this is definitely a great one to pick up. I also just love the found characters, and I love all the main characters in this book and just how quirky and fun they are. Would definitely recommend. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This book came out in 2021, and I did end up reading it back in 2021, which was now about 4 years ago. Crazy to think that we're already in 2025. But this book had released back in May of 2021, and I remember that when I picked this up and I started reading it, at first I was like, I don't know if I can get into this book, and then literally did not put the book down and finished it within the span of a day. This book is basically following the story of a woman and her fiance, boyfriend's daughter, who she and that girl already have a little bit of a strained relationship. And they basically go on an adventure trying to figure out where this man went. So basically, he has disappeared from their lives, and now the women are left to pick up the pieces. People are coming up to the doorstep asking about him. Like, you know, he's on the news. There's a lot of like craziness surrounding him, and we just don't know where he disappeared to. So she goes on a crazy adventure to try and piece together all the details, and so many little things are revealed along the way. And the conclusion of this book is absolutely incredible as well. It is a little bit of leave it up to the leave it up to the reader kind of an ending, but it was absolutely great. You do also get closure in a lot of way too. So that was really fun to see. But this book was just highly, highly entertaining. And I also love the fact that the book took place in San Francisco and then also in Texas. So I was at the time in San Francisco for residency, and then I was also born and raised in Texas. So it was just really fun to see that dynamic in this book, and I really enjoyed that as well. Great book, was a 5-star read. Until date, I still think about this book, and it's been 4 years. This book. So this book I actually read last year, and if you guys watched my favorite books of last year video, this was definitely one of them. The Lies I Tell was such a fun read. It's basically about a woman who's a con artist, and she's been doing her conning and like jumping from situation to situation, screwing over terrible men, trying to get back some money, and basically at this point take down the worst man in her life. And meanwhile, there's a reporter who's a young woman who's trying to figure out her story and basically catch her in the act in order to figure out, you know, what motivates this con woman. In the middle of all of this, they end up meeting, and they actually end up liking each other and becoming friends, but she's still a reporter and she's still a con woman. So what happens? Only time will tell. Definitely recommend reading this book. It gave me chills reading this book, not in a scary kind of way or a thriller kind of way, but like more from the perspective of I just love the character development, the character details, and I loved every single interaction these two women had. The strain between the two characters of liking each other and actually wanting to be friends, but basically playing this cat and mouse act was really, really fun. It reminded me very much of like Catch Me If You Can vibes. So great book, definitely enjoyed it, would strongly recommend. The next two books I'm actually going to show side by side because they're the same author. And that would be one of my all-time favorite authors. And I can't find my copy of The Silent Patient. I do own it. It's around here somewhere. Theoretically. I just don't know where it is. It's somewhere. But Alex Michaelides is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. At this point, I know for sure he's written 3 books. I believe The Silent Patient came out quite some time ago because I had read it before residency had ended, and I loved that book. Alex Michaelides is a genius with a psychological thriller. So if you're in the mood for a good psychological thriller, he's your guy. The Maidens and The Fury were also absolutely excellent. So The Silent Patient, which I'm not showing in the screen right now, is basically about a patient who's seeing her psychologist who will not talk. She will not open her mouth. She will not use her words. And the psychologist is basically trying to break it down and get to the root of the issue. And throughout the course of the book, you learn a lot of crazy twists and turns. And the final ending of the book is absolutely phenomenal. Strongly recommend that book. Then you have the Maidens. The Maidens is basically taking place on a college campus. It's a little dark academia adjacent, but it's more, I would say, psychological thriller. It's about a woman who basically has a niece, I believe, who she is taking care of. They're at the university around the same time, and all of a sudden bodies start disappearing and they're trying to figure out what's going on. There is a question mark of whether or not there is a murderer on the campus, and a lot of fingers get pointed towards a very specific professor, and just a lot of dark, twisty turns in this book. It was very, very enjoyable and fun to read, and the characters are very, perfectly flawed and perfectly perfect and just written so beautifully. And The Fury is also very well done. Basically, you have a cast of bunch of people who are friends, but more frenemies, if you will, and they're all stuck together on an island and they're forced to face their demons. This book literally starts off by saying we're narrating the story of how someone died, but while they can tell you who quote unquote died, they're not going to tell you how it happened, because the whole purpose of this book is to understand the motivations of how they got to where they were. It's such a fun book. This book was released in January of 2024. I had literally read it very soon after that, and I loved every single second of it. I also annotated the crap out of this book. It was very, very enjoyable, and I just love some of the quotes that he says. It's just, I think, really speaks to the human mind, the darker side of the human mind. So if you like those type of books, it's great. So for example, here's a quote, "I'm not hot-headed. When I become angry, I don't rage. I sit down, quietly, very still, armed with pen and paper, and plot my revenge with ice-cold precision. I skewered her with that play, exposing our relationship as a sham, and Barbara as the vain, ridiculous old fool that she was." This character, the way he thinks, the way that he relays the story to you, all of his history, his background, how he ends up on this trip, how he becomes friends with the victim, all this stuff is just, it's such a well-written book, and it's a great psychological story. And I definitely think if that's what you're looking for and psychological thriller is your vibe, definitely consider picking up Alex Michaelides, because he does do a beautiful novel. Then next up, I'm going to talk about another one of my favorite authors. So once again, I have 3 books by this author. So I'm just going to hold all of them up at the same time. And that is none other than the mastermind, the brilliant Riley Sager. Riley Sager is a pen name. I actually don't know the author's real name. I should, because I've looked it up multiple times and I always forget because I still associate the name Riley Sager with him. But he does write under a different pen name. He's written multiple different books now. I have read every single one of them. I have owned every single one of them. And I would say these are the 3 that definitely stuck out to me the most. The House Across the Lake is a little bit interesting. It's definitely a thriller mystery vibe, and it's basically about a woman who has her own history and her own past of craziness, and she's basically observing her neighbors who live across the way, who are a famous actress and her fiance husband, and basically she sees things through the windows, and she's concerned that she's being abused. She goes out of her way to try to save this woman. She is also recently a widow. She has a husband who also happened to die at this lake, and throughout the course of the story we understand why. There's a little bit of a delve into the supernatural with this one, so that was a little interesting and a little bit weird, but the overall vibes of the story was absolutely phenomenal. Lots of twists and turns, and I just think it was written so well, and it definitely kept me on the edge of my seat. Then we have Survive the Night. This is about a woman who's trying to get home. She is basically driving home from college. She has recently seen that a lot of her loved ones and other women have been dying on campus, and most recently her best friend was targeted as the victim. And on her way home, she encounters the man that has been stalking and killing women across the campus. It's a very, very Interesting read. I think it was very fast paced. It was very enjoyable. I did, by the end of the book, definitely know who the villain was going to be, but the way that we got to that point was very, very fun to read. And I think the final moment between the two characters face off at the end when she's trying to escape the murderer is so good. So such a great book, such a fun read. Would definitely recommend. And then the last book I have by Riley Sager is the first one that I ever read by him. So I think that might be why it's one of my favorites. I know a lot of people say there are other books they like by him more, but I really, really liked Lock Every Door. This is like also a very thriller-esque vibe. It's about a woman who basically has no friends, no family, no real background. She's almost like dispensable, if you will. She's asked to house sit this beautiful apartment, and her pay for doing this is insane, and her only job is that she's not really allowed to have anyone come over or entertain anybody, and she has to just take care of this little apartment. And throughout the course of this, she notices that a lot of her neighbors just randomly disappear. You know, there's a lot of history associated with, you know, psychopathy and madness associated with this hotel. And eventually, as things progress, they get more and more spooky and creepy. And eventually she has to figure out whether or not she's safe in this apartment and what is actually going on that's causing all the craziness around her. I loved this book. This was a 2019 book. I actually ended up reading this book for one of my book clubs, and it's my very first Riley Sager that I ever read. And it was also perfect because Paper and Glam is all about the pink and black vibes as well. It's a group of women that are just very, very like into their girly vibes. And this book fit that theme so perfectly, but I absolutely adored this book. I thought this was brilliant. And since then, I have read every single Riley Sager book. I truly believe you are not going to make a mistake reading any of the Riley Sager thriller books. Like, I think if you're looking for a thriller, he is a mastermind. So I would definitely recommend his works. The next book I have here is actually an interesting book. I gave this book a 2-star, but I gave this book a 2-star because of the way it made me feel. It made me feel very cringe and scared on the inside. It's basically looking at the world in the future. And in this world, you have a bunch of women who have been murdered. And they were murdered, you know, at the wrong time. They are also considered pillars of society because they have families and children. And so people have gone out of their way to try to revive these women. And the way that's done is by cloning. So these women are basically clones of their original selves. And the story is that they have been murdered by a serial killer. You're basically following this clone throughout the course of the story who has the memories of her predecessor, but is still not her predecessor because at the end of the day, she's a clone. So it really questions like what makes us human, how much is nature versus nurture important in who we are. And as you go through the course of this story, you also learn like everything that happened to this woman to get her to the point that she was murdered. And you're following the story through the perspective of the clone and her support group. It was a very interesting book. It was very well written. There's a lot of technological components to this, video games and things like that set in the future that were very interesting. There were moments of this book that I found very, very difficult to swallow, and I would hate to see society moving in that direction. But I do think it was a very, very powerful book and a very moving book. It's a thriller in a unique sense of the name. It's a mix of contemporary fiction and thriller, I would say, but very, very well written, and I would recommend for anyone who's just looking to have their world shook. Next up, I have Nita Prose. Nita Prose is a wonderful author. And sorry, my husband's on a call. Nita Prose is a wonderful author. She is the one who wrote The Maid and The Mystery Guest, and I'm very much looking forward to the third book in this installment. She also has a little novella called The Mistletoe Murder, which I have not read yet, and it's so cute and it's green and I love it. And the new book in this one is going to be yellow, and I'm excited about that too. Anyways, coming back to the point, Nita Prose has written this series surrounding a woman who works as a maid in a hotel. She's also a little bit autistic on the spectrum, and she loves to clean. She's also a little bit OCD as well. And while she's working at this hotel, there is a murder that occurs. And there's a question of whether or not the maid is the one who's responsible, and there's people who are trying to pin the blame on her. So naturally, she decides to do some sleuthing. And throughout the course of the book, she figures out how the person was actually murdered and what happened, and thereby saves the name of the hotel and the name of the game, and also protects herself from the biased cops. The Mystery Guest is a continuation of this book in the sense that it's in the same world, but now we have a famous author who has gone missing and has passed away, and they have to figure out which of the guests or which of the staff members is responsible for the death of this famous actor. famous author, and it was just so easy to eat up. I think these books are particularly unique because they are using a main female lead who is a little bit autistic and doesn't know how to react in appropriate ways in social settings. So watching her navigate communication with other characters, watching her do her sleuthing, seeing like who her real friends are and who appreciates her for who she is, also unraveling things about her own past and her own history, who her mother was, who her family was, because she has been raised by her grandmother her whole life, was also really fun to read. Overall, I think this is an excellent series, and I would strongly recommend it to everyone who's looking for a fun, cozy, fast-paced mystery thriller vibe. Let's take a breath. Whoa, that's been a lot so far, right? Right. Moving on, I have books by the Queen of Murder and Mayhem herself, Agatha Christie. I grew up loving Agatha Christie. I was first introduced to Agatha Christie with And Then There Were None, which is part of this omnibus here. And I am obsessed with that story. So And Then There Were None is one of the few books that she's written where it's actually a standalone murder mystery. And it does not rely on the characters of Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot, which are common detectives that she uses in her novels in order to solve the mystery. So it was really fun to get a very unique cast of characters. This is based on the poem 10 Little Indians. And basically each of the Indians dies in a very unique way. In this story, she has 10 individuals who have been invited onto a remote island, and they're slowly getting killed off based on this poem after being invited by a reclusive bajillionaire to come and stay. Throughout the course of the book, you have to figure out who committed the murder, and the final reveal at the end of the book as to who did all the murder and mayhem was absolutely amazing. This book has also been turned into a movie, so people prefer the movie adaptation. It is available to you. It does have a happier ending and twist than this book did, but I strongly recommend reading the book and then watching the movie just because it's so much more enjoyable and delectable that way. I also have a couple of other Agatha Christie books here that spoke to me. Death in the Clouds, I think, is one of my absolute favorites. It is a Hercule Poirot murder mystery. It's about characters that start off on a plane, someone dies, and then as they land, basically he's trying to resolve the mystery and walks you through all these crazy things that are happening in order for him to come to the resolution. I read this book probably over 10 years ago, and it's still in my brain. That's how good this book was. And then we also have Five Little Pigs. This one was also really fun. It's about an artiste who ends up dead, and it's a question of how this happened. Let me read the back actually, just because this one's actually really fun. Amias Creel's passion for painting and women made him famous. His murder made him infamous. So it's about an artist who died. 16 years ago, his jealous wife was tired, convicted, and sentenced to life for the notorious slaying. Now their daughter, Carla, a young woman convinced that her mother is innocent, has presented the brilliant Belgian sleuth Hercule Poirot with an equally brilliant challenge to clear her mother's name by returning to the scene of the murder and finding the fatal flaw in the perfect crime. So this is, again, a murder mystery that's been solved 16 years after the matter. And it's just written so well. I love this one. It's probably one of my favorite Hercule Poirot novels. And then I also love this book, Murder on the Orient Express. This has also been turned into a film adaptation, which actually follows the book pretty closely. So on this one, if you don't really feel like reading the book, you can totally watch the movie. But I will also say the book version of this is so good. Reading all the twisty turnies of this book and understanding how all these different characters like play a role with one another is fascinating. And I just think this is probably one of the best books I've ever read. Agatha Christie as a whole, that woman will always hold my heart when it comes to thrillers and mysteries. I truly think she is the queen of murder and mayhem, and there is a reason that she's a cult classic. So would strongly recommend picking up, honestly, any Agatha Christie book. I don't think you're going to be disappointed, but those are just some of my favorites in case you were interested. Next up, I have a surprising author. She has a lot of ridicule surrounding her right now, but she was also extremely popular. I think 20-year-old me absolutely loved this author, and she primarily writes romance, but this particular book really made big news and had a huge movement on the internet because it was one of her first books that was more on the vibes of thriller. And that is none other than Verity by Colleen Hoover. This book is so interesting to me. It's also very psychological thrillery vibes. It's basically about a man who's taking care of his wife who's completely comatose and bedridden, and he is her primary caregiver. They do have a child together, and then he ends up hiring a nanny. Now, it just so happens that this nurse nanny who comes in to help take care of her is also basically requested to finish her manuscript. So this woman is also an author, and she has been selected to finish Verity, this famous author's last memoir, and last novel. And as she's sitting there and going through the pages of the book and starts looking into, completing this book for Verity, lots of crazy things start happening around her. And the question mark becomes, is Verity truly comatose, or is something else going on? It's a great book. Definitely enjoyed it. Finished it within a day. Gave me chills. Loved this book. Read this book probably 8 years ago, and I still love it. So still think about it, still love it. And I wouldn't say Colleen Hoover is for everyone. I think that she does some things very, very well, and some things are not her, cup of tea. But I would say that this book in particular was very good. It was copyrighted back in 2018, and this book in particular was released in 2021, this particular copy. So yeah, I read it closer to that 2018 mark. So great book, would recommend, worth the read. Then I have a series to share with you guys. Now, this is a young adult series, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's basically the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She's also the author who wrote the celebrated series all over the internet, The Inheritance Games. But I particularly liked this series more. It's basically following the story of a bunch of kids who have been handpicked by the FBI to be brought upon to review cold cases because of their upbringings and the crazy things they've gone through. They've basically developed a sixth sense, and using that sixth sense, they can find tells in regular adults and human beings that you would not be able to find otherwise. And the FBI is basically training them in order to be able to review cold cases and pick out things that may have not been seen in the past to help resolve these cases and basically find closure. Now, in the midst of this, of course, they're teenagers, so they're going to get themselves into trouble. There's crazy romance tropes that are happening in here. You have your love triangles and everything else, but you also have ridiculous nonsense happening, kidnappings, running off on their own, hiring daddy's jet and just taking it wherever they want to go, getting their hands messy in active FBI cases. There's a lot of crazy nonsense that's happening, but the cast of characters are so perfectly flawed and so perfectly beautiful, and the vibes of found family in these are amazing. And I just think it's the perfect combination of thriller, mystery, but also romance, young adult, and just coming of age. So if that sounds like it's up your vibe, definitely consider reading this. This is probably one of my favorite young adult series of all times. Then I have this book, The Husband's Secret by Liane Moriarty. Now, I do think Liane Moriarty is a phenomenal author. I have every single one of her books as well. She also does a phenomenal thriller. Again, I would say more along the lines of a psychological thriller, more so than true murder mystery, but the vibes of these books are phenomenal. This is a Australian author. Her books have also been interpreted and turned into TV shows and movies. She's the one that wrote The Big Little Lies. She also wrote 9 Perfect Strangers, which has been adapted into a movie. And I believe another one of her books is considered for making a movie, which is Truly Madly Guilty. This book in particular was my favorite. The Husband's Secret kept me on the edge of my seat. I finished this book within a day. Basically, it's about a woman who's been married forever. They have children together, she and her husband. She happens to go upstairs and she's cleaning out the closet, and she comes across a letter that has been marked to her to only be opened should something happen in the future to her husband. Well, she happens to read that letter, and now she has to deal with the aftermath of the secret he's left behind for her. Beautiful book. Beautiful book. Very fun, very fast-paced, quick read. I read this book back in, 4th year of med school? So I graduated 2018. Yeah, so read this book back in 2018, and it still stuck with me. So I definitely don't think you'll go wrong with any of the Liane Moriarty books, but her older books are absolutely phenomenal. And in my humble opinion, this one, What Alice Forgot, and The Hypnotist Love Story were all phenomenal books. Would definitely recommend them, and I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Last but not least, I have another very unique book in the sense that I feel like a lot of people did kind of sort of talk about this online when it first came out, and there were mixed reviews about this book. I'm obsessed with this book. This is very Clue vibes to me. This book was released quite some time ago. I read this back in 2021, I want to say. say, let's see, 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020, 2021. So right around peak COVID times, like December vibes. I read this book and I was absolutely obsessed with this book. This book is basically following the story of a man who's inside of a world, Inception vibes. It's not real, it's all in his mind, but he has been put inside of this world and his goal is to find who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. Every single day he wakes up as a different character, and every character that he wakes up as, they take more and more and more energy to be, because they're more and more intelligent every single time. And so each of these lives that he occupies while trying to figure out how Evelyn Hardcastle died, slowly start to eat away his own personality. So he starts having, at some point in the book, a loss of consciousness and does kind of become a little bit of an unreliable author as he's trying to navigate his clues that he has collected and the findings that he's had with each of these different days that he wakes up, along with the memories of the actual characters that he's inhabiting. Basically, his job is to wake up on these different days and work through the day through each of these different characters, going through the same events that they did with their memories, and he's trying to put together the pieces of figuring out who murdered this woman. Now, he has to figure this out before the end of the 8th day, because if he doesn't, he loses the game and he's stuck in the prison forever. So this was a great book. It is very confusing and convoluted in some ways because he does go through multiple different viewpoints, multiple different timelines. And so it's the same timeline, it's just a repetitive timeline. So it's almost like Cloud Atlas vibes in a way. Like it's like, but not even Cloud Atlas. What would I describe it as? Basically, he's just waking up as a different character every single day, but at the center core of it, like while he is waking up as each of these individual characters, he's also still himself, but he's losing pieces of himself as he continues through the book. By the end of the book, he has to unravel the murder, otherwise he is screwed. I loved this book. It's very, very complex. It's very, very enjoyable. It's not one of those books where I feel like you can just read it in one day, because you do have to sit with some of the characters a little bit, but I totally think you can finish it in 3. I think I ended up finishing this book in about 3 to 4 days, and I loved every single second of it, and I could not be torn away from this book. So altogether, that basically brings me to the conclusion of our video. I know that was actually a little bit more than the initial 20 books that I talked about, almost about 25 books, which I think is perfect for 2025, but hopefully that gave you guys some great options to look into in terms of thrillers. No matter where you are, whether it's morning, night, or evening, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you do like this video content and these book type recommendations, definitely leave me a comment below. Also, let me know if you guys have a favorite thriller that I didn't mention that I need to get my hands on, because your girl is all about her thrillers during this time of the year. So definitely let me know, because I would love to check them out. And currently, for those who want to know, I am working my way through my March reading, and I'm actively reading The Boyfriend on physical copy. And then I'm also doing a combination of the Nook audio and physical copy of Fourth Wing as well. I typically am reading 2 books at a time, so very normal for me, especially since Fourth Wing is actually a reread, so I'm enjoying that as well as I'm getting ready to jump into Onyx Storm. But your girl has hit her thriller vibes hard with The Boyfriend. I'm excited to read this. It's my first Frida McFadden, and so far I'm on chapter 5, so looking forward to that. But altogether, that's all I have for you guys today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. For those of you that are returning, it's so special to have you here. I love creating this community with you. And for those of you that are new here, again, consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. I'll also attach my video playlist here, so if there are any videos that you guys want to check out, it's right there for you. And the subscribe button will be somewhere down here on the screen as well. That being said, have a lovely, lovely day wherever you are. I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye, guys.